So the core theme of biology is evolution, the ability to adapt to your environment. And this one is so important it gets its own video. Unfortunately, to learn all of the details of evolution, you'll have to wait until Biology 2. But we are going to go through some of the basics right now. Evolution is our explanation for both the unity and the diversity of life. That sounds very contradictory. So the unity of life. If you think about all living organisms on this planet, they are all made up of the same DNA molecules, A, T, G, and C. And then they all use the same exact genetic code to turn those DNA sequences into 20 protein amino acids. Every single living thing on the planet. That's a massive unity. That shows that all of the living things on the planet likely diverged from a single cell. That was probably the very first living thing. Okay, so that's the unity. The diversity of life is pretty evident. If you look at the entire planet, think about bacteria, protists, plants, animals, fungus, all of the different things on our planet are very, very different. So we can take this same genetic sequence and we can put it into so many different orders to make so many different ultimate expressions of the genetic sequence to create a massive diversity of living things. How do we classify this diversity? So we classify this in a science called taxonomy. And the most common method of doing this right now is called the binomial nomenclature. Binomial. Bi means two, nomial means name, and then nomenclature just means name again. So it's the two name system. And the two parts that we give each species on the planet is a genus and a species name. So for humans, that is Homo sapiens. You should be aware that the genus is always capital and the species is always lowercase, and that when you type this, it should always be in italics. All of life can be divided into 3 domains. There used to be a 5-kingdom system, and we have since found that that was not the most accurate portrayal of the life on Earth. And so now the most current system is the 3 domains of life. So there are 2 prokaryotic domains called bacteria and archaea, and then 1 eukaryotic domain called eukarya. So we have bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. And you may be interested to know that archaea and eukarya are considered more closely related to each other than they are to bacteria. So this is what the tree would like. Within each domain, we have a kingdom. And inside of bacteria, we have the kingdom Eubacteria. So there's only 1 kingdom in here. So everything in this kingdom is everything in this domain. Inside of archaea, we have archaea bacteria. And then eukarya has 4 large supergroups that we call protists. And so we break this down into kind of 3 different kingdoms. So we have animals and fungus, which are more closely related to each other than plants. And then kind of amongst all of this, there are several other groups that branch off that we call the protists. And I put them in quotation marks because they are not a true kingdom. We can't just group them all together based on evolutionary relationships. And so you can see that the domains that include the bacteria are single-celled prokaryotic organisms. Eukarya is going to contain all organisms with eukaryotic cells. Animals are heterotrophs, meaning that we eat our food. Fungi are also heterotrophs. However, instead of eating their food by consuming it, they secrete enzymes to digest it and then absorb the nutrients. Plants are going to use energy from the sun to do photosynthesis to create their food. And then protists actually do a mix of both, and protists are super, super weird. There are protists that are more closely related to animals. fungus and plants than they are to other protists, which is why, again, this is not a true kingdom. We put it in quotes now. So here you can see another example of the unity and diversity of life. So we have that DNA language that is the core of all organisms. And then you can see this diversity here. So the unity here is they all have wings. And the diversity is that their wings all serve different functions. The penguin is not going to be able to fly in the air. It actually kind of flies underwater. This hawk is probably able to soar for a very long period of time. And so they've all developed from organisms that had wings and adapted to different environments. And so you can see the unity, but also the diversity. So who came up with this idea of evolution? And the famous man is Charles Darwin. Darwin is famous because he published this first. He wrote this manuscript on origin of species by means of natural selection. There was another scientist that was a contemporary of Darwin whose name was Sir Alfred Wallace, and he actually sent his work to Darwin first to get him to look at it. And then as soon as Darwin saw that, he immediately published so that he wouldn't get scooped by this other guy. So there were actually two people, Darwin and Wallace, who came up with the theory of natural selection. Descent with modification is the word that Darwin uses to explain evolution. So evolution just means change. All that happens in the word evolution is that species change over time. Not an individual organism, but populations of species change over time. Natural selection causes the change. So natural selection is the mechanism, it's the machine that drives evolution. So Darwin went on a trip on a boat called the Beagle with his friend for 5 years, and he was the ship's naturalist. And he got to go all over the world, and he observed species in their habitats, and he noted that individuals have variations in their traits. So sometimes the coat color is different, the number of spots on a ladybug, the height of a giraffe. There's individual character differences between individual organisms. And those are heritable. Generally, if both parents are tall, the offspring will likely be tall. If both parents are short, the offspring will likely be short. Darwin also noticed that more offspring are born than can survive. This is called survival of the fittest, right? So not every individual lives. If every individual lived, then there would be no reason to select for the better traits. The organisms with better traits that suit their environment live longer. And so what he noticed is that organisms suited their environment. Organisms that live on land don't look the same as organisms that live in the water because those are completely different environments. So what he concluded was that if you are well suited to your environment, you are more likely to live and have babies. And then eventually over time, because traits are inherited, if you make more babies, you make more things that look like you. And then those traits are going to be pervasive in your environment. If I say the word fitness, what do you picture in your mind, right? Close your eyes. What do you see when I say the word fitness? Do you see yourself at the gym wearing your mask, pumping iron? Because that's not what biology, the word fitness means. Fitness means babies. The more babies you have, the greater your reproductive fitness. This is what scientific fitness means. Fitness is my ability to pass my genes on to the next generation. So the more babies I have, the more genetics I pass on, the more fit I become. The environment selects for the propagation of its species. So this process of selecting for organisms that are fit is called natural selection. So fittest never meant the fastest or the strongest. It means the most able to reproduce. You might be the most able to reproduce because you are the fastest gazelle and you can outrun the lion and thus you can have babies later because you're alive. So here's an example. Darwin is pretty famous for going to the Galapagos Islands, which have a wide diversity of different organisms. And when he went there, he noticed that there were all these finches, and they looked pretty similar to each other. And they also looked very similar to the finch from the mainland, but they're all a little different. We've got some with short, sharp beaks and some with these kind of large, curved beaks. And what he noticed was that organisms that eat insects, that live on islands with lots of insects, had these kind of short, sharp beaks. And then the birds that eat kind of tougher seeds needed these larger, stronger beaks to be able to crush the seeds. And we've seen changes in Galapagos finch beak size and shape as a response to things like droughts, where maybe there's less insects and fruit one year and there's more seeds on an island, and you actually see more large, robust beaks being passed on because there's more food for those animals and they're more able to survive and become fit by having babies.